In this video, I'm going to convert this bland photo into a rich, moody black and white photo. And I'll be going through the whole post-processing workflow in Lightroom Classic. And I'll start the process by completely destroying the image, by reducing the exposure by 4 stops, and then rebuilding the photograph from there. It's a technique that I use for all of my black and white photos, and it helps to remove that blandness in the original whilst introducing a kind of warmth and richness to my black and white images. And I've provided a comprehensive chapter list in the description below so that you can skip to any section that you want to. I'm Tony Eveling, a landscape and outdoors photographer from the UK, and if you enjoy this video then please give it a like, as it really helps to get the word out. And if you want to see more, then subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a new video. Okay, so let's just get on with it. So I'm just going to come up to my lens corrections panel and open that up, and then click on the remove chromatic aberration tick box. And that's just going to get rid of any purple and red fringing, colour fringing that you get on the edges in high contrast areas, such as those branches against that bright white sky at the top there. So after I've done that, I come up to my basics panel and I'm just going to change my profile from Adobe Color to Adobe Monochrome. And that's all I'm going to do with the profile, just convert to black and white. And now I'm not going to make any adjustments in my basics panel yet, because that will affect the entire image and I want to go in and change things locally initially. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do that by opening my masking panel, by clicking on the masking icon there. And I want to start with applying a linear gradient. So I click that and that opens up my panel on the top right corner there. I'm going to drag that down to the bottom left corner just for my convenience. And I've got the linear gradient adjustment panel on the right hand side. So I'm going to take my cursor up to the top of that image and just open up that linear gradient there. Just click and drag down there like you can see, and then I'm going to drag that gradient all the way down, and what that's done is to select the entire image, and you can see that because it's depicted in the red color overlay that I've got set. And now I can make changes within that linear gradient, and the reason for doing this is that I want to leave the basics panel alone whilst I do this. I'm going to make some extreme adjustments here, and I don't want to do that in my basics panel. So I'm just going to even up the exposure a little bit. So just open up those shadows by sliding that shadow slider over to the right, and then I'm going to do it similar with the highlights. Just drag that to the left, and that will dampen down the highlights and bring out more detail around the edges of those branches and leaves and stuff at the top there. So now I've got a much more evenly exposed photograph. Now what I want to do is I just want to reduce the exposure. And this is a really drastic thing that I'm going to do, because I've reduced the exposure by a full 4 stops, the maximum that I can on a normal image. And now what I can do, I can now go in locally to local areas of that image and start to re-expose the image and really get a look that I want for the photo. So I'm going to start by clicking on create new mask, applying a radial gradient. So I'm going to hover over the area where the subject of the photo is, and I'm just going to open up that radial gradient. So I open that right out like you can see, and again the selected area is depicted in red, and you can see I've got maximum feathering applied so that I get a nice blended look to the effect that I'm going to apply. So I'm just going to increase the exposure now within that radial gradient. So I'll dial that right up, and you can now see that kind of 3-dimensional effect that I wanted for that image as we look down that road into that subject area. But there's still a lot of work to do with this image. And I just want to add another radial gradient in that same area, but just covering a smaller area that you can see there. And I just want to increase the exposure again. So that just emphasizes that road at the end there. So let's just reduce that a little bit. You can always come back and make more changes to this. So what I'm now going to do is to lighten those corners a little bit. Just bring out some of the detail, dig out some of those dark shadows. And that will require more radial gradients. And I'm just going to place a center in the corner there and then stretch this out. 100% feathering, as you can see, so I get a nice blended edge, and just increase the exposure. And there you go. And we do the same with the top right corner. Drag that up to the top right corner, and then just drag that edge out. And increase the exposure like we did before. So you're only looking to create enough detail in there. You don't want it too light, and we can always go in and change these changes later, or go in and apply a brush to be more specific in certain areas. But we won't know exactly what we want to do until we progress the image a bit more. So I'm going to do again the same in that bottom right corner. Create new mask, Radial Gradient. Drag that into the corner, and again just drag that over the area that I want and increase the exposure, and just enough increase in exposure there to bring out some of that detail in the corner. It's not perfect by any means. I've got this area here that is still kind of crushed, those shadows, and lots of little areas as well, here, there and everywhere, but I'm going to leave that there for now. What I can do is just come into my basics panel, and I can just drag the black slider to the right a little bit, and I can do that by hovering on the actual histogram itself at that extreme end there, and just left click and drag the mouse to the right, and you can see it brings out some of the detail a little bit there. There's still a bit more work to do, but we're going to have a play around with these sliders in the basics panel. There we can just little bit of exposure, a little bit of contrast, maybe not too much. Let's have a look at the shadows and the white slider. Often the white slider can give you a real pop to the image, but in this case I'm not getting a huge difference there, so I'll just leave that around about there. But I'm quite happy with it, the way this image is going at the moment. I'm going to leave the basics panel there, and I'm going to go into the tone curve, and the secret weapon in the tone curve is the parametric curve, and a lot of people miss out on this, but it's a fantastic way of just tweaking the image and giving it a bit more pop than it had before. And remember, this parametric curve is completely independent of the other 4 curves that you have in the tone curve. And it's worth just playing around with this, because I absolutely love it, especially at the end of processing an image, and you can just create a little bit of extra pop. But anyway, let's start with the highlights first. And let's play with the lights. And that's getting a little too dull there. Let's go the other way. A bit too much. I want a little bit of pop there, so we'll go about +11, that'll do. And now the dark shades in the image go down, so that's a bit too much. And we've crushed those shadows again. And let's play with these shadows, the very darkest pixels in the image. And that gives you a kind of a little faded look there, but we don't want that. Going the other way, create a bit of contrast. Now we're getting a nice little bit of pop in that image. So now we can just tweak the point curve here, and we can change the black point and the white point just to give it a little bit of a faded look, just to dampen down the harshness of that contrast. And I always feel that when you change that white point and sort of darken the bright whites so that pure white becomes a very light grey, it kind of softens the image in a nice pleasant way. So now I'm really happy with that. There's a few more bits and pieces that I want to do in the masking tool, so I'm just going to click the masking icon again. Come down here to that bottom left where my masks are. I'm going to create a brush, and I'm going to load it up with quite a severe exposure increase there, but I'm going to take the flow down to, let's say, about 10%, 13%, that'll do. And what that will do, it will apply 2.23 stops of exposure increase, but only in 13% increments, because of that flow has come right down. And that will allow me just to rub my brush over these darker areas and just going to be fine-grained control over the lightening of those areas, because I'm only applying 13% of that exposure increase effect with each stroke of the brush. And I can go over all these darker areas and just lighten them up a bit and uncrush those crushed shadows, which is exactly what I want to do. Just soften it all up a little bit so I don't get those harsh shadows in there. So anywhere where you feel that there are shadows in there that need just bringing out a little bit. Okay, if we just click on the eye symbol for mask 7, which is that brush tool that I just applied, and you get quite a big difference there in very small areas that I adjusted. Okay, so I want a couple of things now with this mask. I just want to apply a little radial gradient to the fence here, because I feel that is lacking a bit of detail there. So if I just add a gradient there, and then just lighten that up a little bit. There we go. And let's just switch that off and on. There we go. So there's a nice bit of detail in that gate that wasn't there before. And we'll do the same at the sort of the front of that road that goes into the image. There, because I want that road to lead the eye into the image. And then I just want to lighten that up a little bit. Let's increase the exposure. There we go. Just a little bit of pop there. And one final little tweak. I just want to add some of the brush there. Load up some exposure increase in there. So increase the exposure. We've got a nice low flow there. And I just want to, I'm looking at that navigator panel there, and I just feel that that area in the top left is a little too dark. I don't really see it in the bigger picture, but I do see it in that thumbnail in the navigator panel. It's just a bit dark in that top left corner. I want to bring out some of that detail in those trees. And down in that bottom left corner as well. Just bring out some, dig out that shadow area a little bit. Not too much. And over here on the bottom right. And let's just have a look at that mask 10 there. Switch it off. And switch it on. And there's a subtle change there. And one that I feel just blends it all in a little bit better than it had been. One last little tweak in the basics panel. Let's just increase the contrast. Tiny bit of exposure. The whites, bring that down a bit, soften that down. And one final change. I just want to lighten that area up around where that gate is, around there. So one last radial gradient, open it up there in front of the gate. Small exposure increase. And there you have it, one finished image. And here's a before, and here's the after. So before there, you can see that we do not need the green. The green doesn't really add anything to the photo. The colour is kind of irrelevant. And what we're looking at are the shapes of the trees, the fence, the details, the road. And that's what we've got with this black and white conversion. And that exact same process is how all of these photos were also converted to black and white. The process allows you to create a rich, warm, atmospheric look to photos that you may have written off in the past. And now you can go and find some images from your archive right now that may suit this kind of treatment, and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to know how to create a moody and atmospheric look with colour images just like these, then check out this video here.